author of the book Communications from the Other Side, Anthony Quinata. Anthony, it's such a pleasure to meet you in person and to be able to talk to you about your book.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm truly honored.
In your book, you share some pretty incredible stories, and throughout those stories, we get to learn a little bit about you and how you developed your psychic gift. Can you share with us one of those earliest childhood stories about psychic experiences you had?
One of them happened in Iceland. My father, who was in the Navy, was stationed there, and on the way to Iceland, I actually saw a book that said How to Tell Fortunes with Ordinary Playing Cards. All I saw was the front cover, didn't even look at the back cover, because I knew I had no hope at the age of 10 of buying the book, and I knew my mother wasn't going to buy it for me. But one morning, I saw a deck of playing cards, and I thought about the book, and I said to my mom, "Would you like me to tell your fortune?" And she laughed, said, "Yeah, how are you going to do that?" And I said, "With these cards." And she said, "Sure, tell my fortune." So I started shuffling them, and I laid them out in 3 rows of 7, because it was based on a card trick my father had showed me. And after I did that, I just looked and said the first thing that came to my mind. I said, "Your father's sick and in the hospital." And she said, "My father is not sick and in the hospital." I said, "That's what the cards say." And she says, "Where do they say that?" And honestly, it wasn't the cards. It was just a feeling I had. So she said, "Well, if my father were sick and in the hospital, my sisters would have called and told me," and got up and walked away. So I put the cards together, and I didn't know what she was so upset about, because I didn't know what I was doing. The next day she got a call that her father was sick and in the hospital, but not to worry, he'd be out by the end of the week. So the next week she said, "Do that thing with the cards again." So I laid out 3 rows of 7. Actually, I started to, but I stopped at the 9 of clubs. I remember this card to this day. And I said, "You're going to fall and break your leg." She said, "What?" And I said, "You're going to fall and break your leg." And she's like, "Don't be ridiculous." And she got up and walked away in a humph again. And so I put the cards away. And the next day she had taken my sister, Nadine, who was a newborn, to a doctor for a checkup. And when she got back, she was taking Nadine out of the car, and she noticed some toys in the neighbor's yard that looked a lot like ours. So she kept thinking that one of us must have left our toys there and wasn't paying attention to where she was going. Keep in mind, this is Iceland. So what she didn't notice as she's looking at the toys was a patch of ice on the sidewalk that she slipped, protecting Nadine, broke her ankle. So never asked me to tell another fortune for her ever again in her entire life.
Your fascination with ghost stories in childhood is one of the reasons you became a paranormal investigator. Can you share with us one of those experiences?
You bet. Again, when we were living in Iceland, we had an Icelandic babysitter, and I asked everybody if they had any ghost stories. And she shared with me one in which a friend of hers had gone out dancing and was talking to some guys and having a few drinks. And next thing she knew, she was waking up from being unconscious. And she was in a little village. She had no idea where it was. And she went around knocking on doors, trying to get somebody to let her in and help her out. And she went up to one house and was knocking on the door and saw a man on a rocking chair just rocking back and forth, but was ignoring her. So she started banging on the window. The man got up, walked towards her, and stood there and stared at her until she finally screamed and ran away. Well, she went to a church and was banging on the door, and the priest came and opened the door. And he helped her out, and she mentioned to him about this man who refused to help her, just stared at her. And he asked her what the man looked like, and she described him. And according to the story, the priest went white, lost all color in his face, took her to the cemetery. And in Iceland, they not only have markers, but they have pictures of the deceased on the markers. And she said, he said, "Is this the man?" And she said, "It is." And it was the man who was rocking back and forth. It was his marker. He had been dead for about 50 years.
Obviously, from the experiences you've had, you believe in ghosts. Can you tell us why some spirits come to haunt certain locations?
Yeah, I've been told a number of different reasons. Nobody came and showed me the way. I didn't see a light. There were no relatives to help me cross over. I remember investigating a case in which a young lady was complaining about a ghost in her closet. And I went, communicated with the ghost, and he was a Roman Catholic and gay and afraid of being judged by God. So even after death, he was still in the closet. Other people simply enjoy this life and really don't care to move on. They are having fun where they are.
Have you ever heard from anyone who's passed over that they were confused about whether or not they were dead?
Oh, a lot of times. A lot of times I will say to somebody, do you know you passed away? And they'll argue with me. Okay? And they'll think the people who are living in their house are the ghosts, and that they're the ones who are actually still alive.
How did you help them know that they were dead?
I'll ask them, what's the date? Who's the president? Do you see any of your loved ones? Do you see your wife, your kids? And then I'll tell them, if you look, I'll create a white light for you and you'll see your relatives on the other side. And a lot of times they'll look and they'll be really shocked. As a medium, I've talked to a number of people who say that death is like going to sleep and waking up, and they have no clue that they passed away, which is why a lot of times we'll see our relatives or we'll see a religious figure like Jesus, Buddha, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
When did you first learn that you could speak to the dead?
It was in 1985. I was living in Salt Lake City, Utah for about 7-8 months, and I'd gone to a party, and unfortunately the party got kind of raucous and police were called in. And I thought, well, this is a good time to leave. And I looked for the two guys I'd come with, and they also thought it was a good time to leave. Unfortunately, they decided to leave without me. So I had to call a friend of mine who lived in a little town called West Jordan, and which is a good 20, 30 minutes away, but she was the only one I could think of to call. So she came and picked me up, and with her roommate, and we were sitting in the trailer that they lived in. And actually, I was sitting on the floor, and they were sitting at the kitchen table. There were only 2 chairs. And I said to Karma, who owned the trailer, I said, didn't you tell me once that your house was haunted? And she said, yeah, why? And I said, well, there's a man standing behind you in your hallway. And they both looked, and neither of them saw him. So I thought, okay, either somebody slipped something in my drink, or I'm seeing a ghost, which would have been the first for me. And I started asking him questions, like, what do you want? And one of the things he said to me was, please tell the ladies I'm sorry for scaring them to death when I open up their bedroom door. And so I passed this on, and they both screamed. And it turned out that in the master bedroom, there was a bathroom that had no door for privacy, so they closed the bedroom door. But when you close the bedroom door, it was extremely hard to open. And almost on a regular basis, they'd take a shower or they'd be using the bathroom, and in the mirror they would see the door slowly swing open. And one time Karma said she saw her 6-year-old grandson on the other side, and she said there's no way he could have opened that door. So I said, well, let me see the door. So we closed it tight, and I tried to open it. It wouldn't open. Put my shoulder against it, it wouldn't open. Finally, I put my shoulder against it and shoved as hard as I could, and it opened. So I knew this thing wasn't opening on its own. Well, that night I was sleeping on the couch, and I woke up, and I remember thinking I'm underwater because I just felt wet all over. I could hear air bubbles going past my ears. And I grabbed the top of the couch with my left hand, the bottom of the couch with my right hand, and just forced myself off. And the moment I hit the floor, it all stopped. And I thought, I've got one more message to deliver. So I told Karma the next day, I said, I think he came back to me again last night. And she said, what did he say? And I said, well, let me ask you this, was this place ever underwater? And she said, oh yeah. And I said, did people ever drown in this area? And she said, all the time. That's why they drained it and named it West Jordan after the Jordan River. And I said, I think that whoever this man is that I saw last night and apologized for opening your door, drowned where your sofa is. And I said, but there's only one way to know. And she said, what's that? And I said, if it never opens again, we know. I saw her 3 weeks later, and I said, any problems with your door? She said, no, now that you mention it, it hasn't opened since. So, but at the time, if you would have asked me, are you a medium? I would have known what you were talking about. I didn't even believe that talking to the dead was possible, to be very honest with you.
For your book, you chose the subtitle, Death is Not the End of Life, Love, or Relationships. What has that meant to you in your work as a psychic medium?
It's more like the lessons I learned as a medium, because before I started doing this work, like virtually everyone, I wondered what happens after death. Being raised Roman Catholic, I even prayed once. I said, Jesus, you better not be lying. There better be something after this, because I didn't even care for me. I was just thinking about the people I loved and the people who, were doing good things, okay? And since then, I have found that that's the constant message that those who have crossed over want us to know. Death isn't a wall. It's simply a doorway that we pass through from this life onto a life that's eternal. And their physical bodies may have died, but not their love for us. Okay? They're still alive, very much alive. In fact, I've been told more alive than they ever were than when they were here, and that the relationships we had with them are still intact. And I like to say that those we loved and loved us back, including our pets, never die. Life goes on. And that's probably the greatest lessons I've learned since becoming a medium, or acknowledging that I'm a medium.
Anthony, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I love the book. I love your stories, and thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Communications from the Other Side, Death is Not the End of Life, Love, or Relationships is published by Fourth Dimension Press, an imprint of A.R.E. Press, and is available at arecatalog.com.